Hello there guys, Teacher Krishna here, and welcome to our next class for the fourth unit. Just like you know, this is a class that is part of Beehive School and Ninth High School. We are working on the subject biology and week number 28. So let's go over our presentation. Let's start with our end in mind, which is the following. Students will be able to use Canva to synthesize the content from lesson number 1. And here you have a small summary of the activities that you need to complete today. Number 1, access the platform Canva and make a mind map about the information from the lesson. Remember to read pages 5 to 7. So you have to read all of the topic, but you're going to find most of the information in this presentation. Don't forget to read pages 5 to 7 because that is information that you need to take into consideration as well for your mind map. Number 2, study the topic. And when you are done, number 3, take the assessment for topic 4.01. So you don't actually have to make like the regular summary that we do every single class. But in this case, you are going to actually synthesize all of the topic in a mind map in Canva, okay? But anyways, it is still important that you include the date, the title, end in mind, and then you include the graphic organizer. So make sure to access canva.com after you have finished, of course, watching this video and reading the topic. And you are going to find several visual supports, such as this one right here, in which in the middle of the diagram, you can write down the title of our topic. And around it, you can write down some important information that you would like to take into consideration for studying later on. Okay, so this is the rubric that I'm going to use to evaluate your graphic organizers. I'm going to evaluate creativity, research, and spelling and grammar. For creativity, it will be the following. Creativity is original in thought and demonstrates a knowledge of the project expectations. When we talk about research, research exceeds the required elements of understanding. And lastly, regarding spelling and grammar, excellent use of standard English with minimal or no mistakes. Okay, so now finally, let's go over our topic. And our topic for today is ecology. And how is it related exactly to this small picture that we have right here? We're going to find out. So ecology is the study of the interactions between living and non-living things. They all interact in a specific environment. So in absolutely anywhere, you are going to find living and non-living things. If we analyze the picture that we have right here, specifically in living things, we're going to have plants that is basically the tree and probably the grass that we see around. And when we talk about non-living things, we are talking about, for example, the ground, rocks, water, sunlight, etc. And human activities are changing the relationships between living things and the world in which they live. So, unfortunately, if we look at it from a very objective perspective, humans are actually destroying their environment. And it's very sad to think about it. Because when humans actually destroy the environment, or of course the place where animals have to live, they have to look for other alternatives. Let me tell you about my experience. When I was younger, when I was in 6th grade, I used to go to a public school that is in Zone 8 in Quetzaltenango. And I remember that right at the top of my class, there were some sort of tubes, and there were some tubes that actually had that they were empty inside. But what was interesting was that there were a lot of birds living in those tubes. So they would actually build their house inside of those tubes because they were looking for other alternatives, let's say. Because there weren't many trees in the zone. And what happens is that, the trees are the natural environment or the natural house of birds. So what happens when they can't find a tree to live in? They have to look for another alternative, such as artificial houses. So that's just one example of how human activities change the interactions that living and non-living things are going to have. Now we go with ecological levels of organization. So the organization in our Earth is, of course, all together, but we have like different areas to cover. So first of all, the biggest one is the biosphere. It includes all living things, and it extends for 26,000 meters. So basically, the biosphere is all around us. It's here in Guatemala, in United States, Europe, Asia, everywhere around, because it includes living things. We have a biome. It is a large geological area that is classified according to their climate, plants and animals. So we can have a very cold biome or a hot biome as well, but it's like a little bit more general. It's a very large area with the same climate conditions, plants and animals. We also have climate. It is the average weather conditions. And we talk about the climate specifically in Quetzaltenango, we can say that the climate is regularly between cold and warm, is sunny, cloudy, and in some months of the year, it's actually rainy. We also have an ecosystem. It includes living things interacting with their physical environment. It can be as small as a tree. So, an ecosystem can be, for example, the forest of Petén. So in Petén, you are going to find a lot of living things interacting with other organisms, such as jaguars, monkeys, and you can find a lot of plants that are going to interact with water, sunlight, rocks, soil, and etc. But an ecosystem can also be a small tree, since it can have worms living inside it. So the plant is interacting with the worms, and the plants are interacting with the soil and the ground where they are located at. So an ecosystem can be very small, and it can be a little bit bigger as well. We have a habitat. These are the places where animals live at. They also include abiotic factors such as the rocks, water, and sunlight. So an ecosystem is actually bigger than an habitat. Okay, so an ecosystem can be, of course, all the forest in Petén, and the habitat can be, for example, a place that is located around a portion of water where several animals live at. We also have community, an area that is occupied by different groups of organisms that interact among each other. So we can have, let me think about a forest in Canada. So in Canada, you can find a lot of birds, you can find deers as well, wolves sometimes. So basically, the community where all of those species live together and interact among each other, it's basically classified as community. In population, the amount of organisms of the same species that live at a certain location. Going back to the example in Canada. Let's suppose that there are, I don't know, 5,000 deers living in the wild. So the 5,000 will be the number that represents the population for that specific location. All right, and here you have a small image that somehow summarizes everything we were talking about. So the biosphere basically include all the living things. Okay? So it covers basically all around Earth. Biome, we are talking about a place with its very specific characteristics. A location that has the same climate as well as a certain type of species of plants and animals around. Then ecosystem is a little bit smaller. We are talking about a more specific place, such as I was telling you, it can be an ocean directly, as it's right here. Let's say the Pacific Ocean. We also have the community, which will be smaller than the ecosystem, in which you have a lot of species that are interacting among each other. Then we have the population, which is basically the amount of animals of the same species. And lastly, which will be an individual, which will be a single organism from a certain species. Okay, now we have to talk about abiotic and biotic factors. So here you have some differences between the biotic and abiotic factors. So abiotic factors and biotic factors are totally different. So biotic factors are the ones that are alive, for example, animals, plants, bacteria, etc. And abiotic factors are the ones that are not alive, like sunlight, water, soil, temperature as well can be taken as an abiotic factor. So abiotic factors are non-living things within the environment. They include rocks, water, air, temperature, sunlight, soil, etc. Way more things. And when we talk about biotic factors, they are living things within the environment, and they include animals, plants, bacteria, microorganisms, etc. And they both work together to sustain life on Earth. So, necessarily, we need both abiotic and biotic factors in order for life to exist. And we are going to see why just in a moment. Ecosystems and the flow of energy. Basically because of the food chain. So the food chain is basically the way energy flows around. Just like you can notice, we start with the producers, so with the plants, that are going to absorb abiotic factors such as sunlight, water, and in some cases they absorb carbon dioxide and they turn it into oxygen as well. And first of all, oxygen is extremely important for all living things. And of course, all of the animals breathe oxygen as well as humans. And then, after the plants or the producers have absorbed that sort of energy, there come several animals that are going to eat the energy, or they are going to eat the species of the plants specifically. Then we are going to have some other animals that are going to consume the insects. We're going to have another animal that is going to consume the animal that actually ate the insect, and so on and so forth. We can continue. So what happens when we find the final consumer, for example? In this case, it's an eagle or a hawk. So when this animal dies, there are some other organisms that are called decomposers. So when an animal dies, they are going to decompose their meat as well as their bones and everything, all of the biological material that it contains. And of course, that decomposition is going to help the producers to absorb more nutrients and continue with the whole flow of energy or with the flow of the food chain. So the food chain, it is a linear transfer of energies, just like we can notice. And trophic, it releases the nutrition provided a certain resource. Okay, now we go with producers, consumers, and decomposers. So producers are basically plants, and they are known as autotrophs. And they bring new energy to the system, just like I mentioned before. And they both are actually divided into photoautotrophs. And we also have chemioautotrophs. It will be photoautotrophs and chemioautotrophs. It's a little bit difficult to pronounce it sometimes. So photoautotrophs are going to sustain from sunlight, and chemioautotrophs are going to sustain from chemical components. Consumers are basically the ones that are going to eat, or they are going to take an advantage out of the energy that was produced by the producers. And because they cannot synthesize inorganic components. And their main categories are herbivore, omnivore, and carnivore. And lastly, we have the decomposers. They are natural recyclers. And they are both divided in the tridivores and saprophs. We have to double check on the pronunciation of that word as well. So the tridivores, they feed on dead plants. And saprophs, they consume the remaining organic material that other decomposers cannot. All right. And here you have another summary. Producers, basically plants, consumers, animals, and decomposers can be, for example, a crab that is infected by some mushroom or by some other bacteria that are decomposing the material from there. So that's it for me for now, guys. It's been great seeing you around, and I will meet you in our live session that will take place in a couple of minutes. Thank you for coming, and goodbye. Always take care of yourselves.